Welcome back. Tonight we've got roast butternut squash with oven baked salmon in a rather interesting honey and mustard marinade, and some hash brown potatoes to go with it. And over to Ting.
สวัสดีค่ะวันนี้จะมาทำปลาแซลมอนอบกับบัตเตอร์นัทแล้วก็กินกับแฮชบราวน์
And here are the ingredients. For the fish, we've got 450 grams of fillet salmon. This is Atlantic salmon we've got here. And 2 tablespoons of mustard for the marinade. And 1/4 of a teaspoon of pink Himalayan salt, freshly ground, and the juice from 2 limes. And in here there will be, I haven't got it out because it is crazy with ants, but there will be 2 tablespoons of honey, also for the marinade. And the hash browns for 3 people, this is, we're doing tonight, 3, maybe 3.5. We've got 5 potatoes there, peeled and ready, they'll be grated. And then for the roast butternut squash, we've got a butternut squash about this size. Well, it's actually a little bit bigger than this. You can see roughly in compare it to the salmon. The one we've done is a bit bigger, and we've peeled it. It's very easy to peel. If you pop the butternut squash in the microwave for 3.5 minutes after just puncturing the outside with a fork, like you do with sausages, 3.5 minutes in the microwave, and then you can peel it really easily. Scoop the pith and the nuts from the inside, the seeds from the inside, and then chop it. And with that, we've got a teaspoon of salt, and then we've got some spices to just mix along with it. The spices, we've got a 1/4 of a teaspoon of paprika there, a 1/4 of a teaspoon of chili powder, a 1/4 of a teaspoon of cumin, and a teaspoon of rosemary. And there we go, that's all together. In fact, I was wrong, it's not a teaspoon of salt, it's 1/2 a teaspoon of salt, which we've just put in the cap for convenience. Now it all fits together. You want to put the oven on for 200 degrees, and it all goes fairly easily together. You put the marinade on the salmon, which we'll show, but it for the right amount of time. Then you roast the butternut squash in the oven, and when it's almost ready, you pop the salmon in with it, and that gives you just enough time to fry the hash brown potatoes. So there you go. Okay, so we're off now, and first thing to do is to marinate the fish. So we pop the salt's gone in, we add the honey and the lime juice and the mustard, and give it a good mix around. We've also grated the potatoes and squeezed and washed them and squeezed them out. That's the mustard going in for the marinade. The potatoes have been grated and squeezed, washed and squeezed out. We will be adding a little bit of garlic powder, a little bit of onion for flavouring, and then frying it in the finest extra virgin olive oil. And the juice from the 2 limes, and that gets mixed up until it's obviously well mixed. and then we'll start basting the salmon with it. So we baste the salmon with the marinade quite thickly on top, and it will sit while the butternut squash is roasting in the oven. So once you've given it a good coating, you can just pour not all of the rest, most of the rest on, because we keep a little bit to just pour on the top when it comes out of the oven. So there, that should be good, and that's put to one side to marinate for half an hour. The salmon is marinating, so now the butternut goes into a bowl. It's dry, but still we then pop the salt, sprinkle it over, and the rosemary, cumin, chili and paprika all gets sprinkled over it, and then you sort of toss the whole lot round together so it all gets a relatively even coating. You want to try and make sure that the spices have been picked up by every piece, because as it roasts, the flavors will sink into the butternut as it softens. And then when you feel you've covered it all completely, you pop it onto a baking tray, which we have here with foil on it. For a single layer, you don't want to heat it up. It can be spread out, leaving enough space at one end for the salmon to be added once the butternut has become soft and forkable, which will be in about half an hour. So you flatten it out, and then we'll put that into the oven as soon as the oven has reached 200 degrees that we've set it for. There are the grated potatoes, beautifully dry now, having rinsed and squeezed them to get the starch out. So we're going to mix them with some spices here. We've got black pepper, about half a teaspoon of black pepper, half a teaspoon of pink salt, and between half and a quarter of a teaspoon of garlic powder. We toss those in, and then just a little bit by little bit probably, and stir it around to give the potato a good covering and to try and get the flavour throughout the mixture. You can toss it around with your hands, or you can do it with a spoon until you feel confident that it's throughout. Right, you can see it's got a good sprinkling that's all through the potato, so that can now just be put aside briefly, and when the butternut's ready, you put the salmon in with it, and for about 15 minutes the salmon needs, and that's just enough time to fry this in virgin olive oil until it's brown and toasty and crunchy. The salmon's been marinating for about a quarter of an hour, so we're just flipping it over now. We skinned it before we were preparing. You flip it over and then baste it a bit on the top, and leave it for another quarter of an hour. Okay, 20 minutes has gone, and we've just taken the tray out of the oven. The butternut's beginning to be soft, but it's still got a bit more time. We're just transferring the salmon from its marinade. Bit slippery, like many a fish is. The salmon's going across onto the tray, and we'll baste it one more time, and then it'll go back in the oven. So that's the last of the marinade going on. and I'll stand back so it can go back into the oven. We reckon about 15 minutes for this now. Right, this is the extra virgin olive oil. This is organic. We got it from Tesco's, would you believe? We're going to do the potato in two lots. You need to keep it on medium heat. Don't cook it too fast or it'll burn. And rather than put the whole thing in at once, we're going to do it in 2 sessions, because then it's easier to sort of flip them over once they're going. So make sure that the olive oil has access to all of it, and then fry it probably for about 7 minutes, turning it once, and as soon as it's browning we'll whip it off and store it on a plate. So we'll come back to you. So as soon as you feel the underneath is brown a bit and crispy enough to turn it, then you can just flip it over. Doesn't really matter if it falls apart. It's the crispy, hashy brownie-ness of it all that's important. Oh, look at that, that's looking good. It's going to be brown and crispy, so that's good. And then you do the rest with for the rest of the potato. So time's up, and out comes the butternut and the salmon. And that's what you've got, and we'll just transfer it over onto the serving dish. And that's what it looks like once it's served up. There you go, your salmon with an interesting marinade. We've taken a little bit through to coat it if so required, and the hash brown potatoes and the roast butternut squash. It smells absolutely delectable. I think we should have chosen a slightly bigger butternut squash, but anyway, there you go. Enjoy it.